Hi guys. So I was in Italy recently and I became obsessed with this cooking network called Alice. And it's 24 hours of chefs, here's a surprise, just cooking and making these great recipes. And while there's nothing vegan, maybe I could make a cooking show in Italy. It's a thought. Anyway, while there's nothing vegan, the way they cook, sort of step-by-step, old-school cooking show style, I could watch them and adapt. And one of the things they did really amazingly well, because they're Italians, is dessert. And I watched them make this cake one day. It was carrot almond cake. And it's so light and lovely and wonderful. So I decided to adapt it. And now I'm sharing it with you so that you can make it for your family and friends when you need a lovely, light, wonderful cake. So it has obviously carrots and almonds and orange zest, and it's fresh and satisfying and pound cake-like. It's amazing. And the one that they made actually did have no eggs, but it had lots of other stuff in it that I don't use, so I adapted. So first thing you have to do is, I'm doing it in a standard bundt pan. This was my grandmother's bundt pan. She's always oiled it, although it is some form of non-stick. I have no idea what it's made of, and I don't want to know, but she made a million cakes in it, and we didn't die, so I'm guessing it's probably okay. The other thing I did was preheat the oven to 350. When you're baking, you want to prep your pan, have all your ingredients that you need with you, and get your oven ready so that you make the batter, put it in the pan, put it in the oven. If you let your batter sit while you oil the pan and preheat, it just sinks in on itself and you end up with this dense cake that could double as a doorstop. That's not your goal. You want a lovely light cake. So your recipe at home can be made with whole wheat pastry flour or whole wheat sprouted flour. I am using farro flour today. It's a little bit lower in gluten. I fell completely in love with it in Italy. I bought it actually in the supermarket. It's organic. And so what I'm doing is a trick that my grandmother taught me, which is not to scoop your flour from the container or the bag, but to spoon it out, because this puts more air in the batter. So I need 1.5 cups of farro flour. That's going to be 3 of these. And so you just do this. I never do that little trick where people like run their knife along the measuring cup to flatten it, because I think that also takes air out of the flour and results in a heavier cake. If that's the way you bake and you like to bake that way, have a ball. But I find, because I don't use eggs and because I want my cakes to have every opportunity to rise and be light, I do it this way. So, okay. Don't get crazy on measuring either. You know what I mean? Baking's much more about passion. The second flour that's going in is 1/2 cup of semolina flour. Yep, the very same flour that you use to make pasta. And what this is going to do is, you look how fine and beautiful this is. What this is going to do is give your cake a very light texture, but also a beautiful golden color. Sometimes whole grain flours can make your cakes dark. This is going to make the cake nice and light. Then the next flour to go in is blanched almond flour. You can use Trader Joe's, you can use Bob's Red Mill, just about 1/2 cup again. So all the dry ingredients are going to go in together. This is one of those 1 bowl, a whisk, and a spoon. No stand-up mixer, no hand mixer. You don't need any of it, right? So a little salt, which is going to make it sweet, sort of like, I don't know, about 1/8 of a teaspoon, just a little bit. And then we're going to use 8 tablespoons or 1/2 cup of coconut sugar. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You can see I carefully measure, right? But what I'm doing is adding the sweet taste to this. Now all your dry ingredients are here. So now we take a whisk and sort of just combine things. You can do this with a spoon if you want to, but I really love using a whisk for this, because then I make sure the coconut sugar is all the way through. And as soon as I have my flours combined is when I add my leavener. You can do it all together, but I also find that I sort of like doing it this way. Makes me think about things. So we're going to use 1 teaspoon of baking soda and 2 teaspoons of baking powder. And this is in place of egg. Don't use more than the recipe calls for because you'll end up with a funny taste at the end of the cake. And you want the cake to be sweet and pleasant. You don't want like a metallic, oh, she used way too much baking powder. This cake is not real high. It's a little dense. It's like a pound cake. It's actually really quite nice. Once everything's all mixed together, there's no lumps from the coconut sugar or the almond flour, you're ready to start adding your moist ingredients and your dry ingredients. And the first thing to go in is a grated carrot. And what I did was just use a simple, you can use a box grater or a hand grater. I would not use a microplane for this, which I'm gonna use for the orange zest because it'll make the carrot too soupy and you want the carrot to have some texture. But then we take an organic orange. If you're gonna use the zest of oranges or citrus or limes, please make sure it's organic. Let's not grate pesticides right into our cakes. What a drag. And then you can use as much of this as you want. All of the orange, half an orange. I tend to really like orange flavor and I think it's a really good combination with carrot because it makes everything, it makes the carrot taste sweeter, makes the whole cake more sort of refreshing. So that goes in, and next go our extracts. We'll take a scant teaspoon of orange extract. And if you want to use orange juice instead of this, you can skip the extract. And when you're using an orange extract, it's not like vanilla. Like vanilla, you can, go a little overboard and it just makes it taste a little bit sweeter. A citrus extract can give your taste, your cake a metallic aftertaste. So try to measure that. We'll use a generous teaspoon of vanilla. Then we add our fat to the cake, which is sort of the butter. We're using avocado oil. I love olivado. Look at this color of this oil. It's green and looks like it came from an avocado. It's unfiltered and it's gonna give me a beautiful buttery finish to the cake, which is what you want. Like if it's gonna be pound cake-like, you kind of need it to be pound cake-like. Okay, is that everything? Baking powder, What do you think? Should we put a little fresh orange juice in and then the water? No, yes, no, a little bit. So we'll take a little bit of fresh orange juice, just squeeze it in. This will really up the ante for the orange. And then you can use almond milk or oat milk or rice milk for the cake, but I have found in baking muffins, cupcakes, cakes, that using water gives me a lighter finish on my cake. And now you just mix with a spoon until the cake batter just comes together to create a lovely, sort of a thick, spoonable batter. Now, we love to mix. We're crazy for mixing. It's like the greatest fun in the world. Let's just mix. But once your ingredients come together, there's no flour on the bottom. What you do is get your spoon and you do what's called folding. Make sure there's no flour left. You see how thick this batter is? And sort of silky. This is called a velvety batter. But do you also see how it looks like it's starting to bubble already from the baking powder and baking soda? This cake is going to rise and be gorgeous. Now, you have to have a little bit of dexterity. You have to be able to pour the batter and turn the pan at the same time so that the batter's even. It takes a little bit of practice, and don't worry about getting it perfectly even because we'll do that part in a second. I'll show you how you do it. So you just keep moving the pan around, get your batter in. It should pour really easily like this. Oh, and then you have to taste it, make sure it's right. Perfect. Don't you love when chefs say that? Perfect. It better be. You're making a video. Now, very often bakers take their cakes and they sort of gently slam them on the counter to get any air out. Please don't do that. You don't have any eggs. You got to keep the air in the batter. So you take a spoon, your mixing spoon, and just lightly sort of walk it around the batter. You see these little bubbles that are bursting? That's going to prevent your cake from having any holes in it. And then this is going to go into the oven for about 35 minutes at 350 on the middle rack. And all those little sort of superstitions that your mom used to say, don't let a draft hit the oven, don't slam the door, don't open the oven, they're all true. Don't touch the oven door for about 15 minutes. I know we like to look, I know we do. Put the light on, look through the little window. Don't open the oven door for like 15 minutes. Now, once the cake comes out of the oven, let me just clean up a little bit here so you can see what I'm gonna do. In about 35 minutes, the cake will come out of the oven and look like this. It's like you can see, it's tender, it's moist, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. Then, so what we're gonna do is lightly glaze the cake. So I'm gonna take a small saucepan and some Suzanne Specialties brown rice syrup. I really like the maple. It's rice syrup that's cooked with fenugreek to give it a maple flavor. And we just need, I don't know, maybe a quarter cup, sort of like that. And then we're gonna take this and bring it to a boil so that it really foams. It's gonna take about a minute. And while that comes to the boil, we have this beautiful half orange. And what we're gonna do is squeeze the orange into the rice syrup after it foams. Now, you don't wanna do this part until it's done cooking. If you cook orange juice, lemon juice, lime juice more than a minute, you get a bitter aftertaste. You want that lovely tart orange. So you're gonna just let that come to the boil, squeeze the orange juice in, and we're gonna pour it over the cake, and you have cake. So, you can see the bubbles starting to form already at the end of the rice syrup at the periphery here. You don't need this to boil over. All you're doing is sort of loosening the sugar so that it becomes a little more syrupy. So we'll just let that come. You gotta be patient. You know what they say about watch pots, although it does eventually boil. So once it happens on the edges like this, just let it go another 30 seconds. You don't want the foam shooting out the top of the pan. If that happens, then your glaze won't sink into the cake. It'll just get hard. And that's not a good thing either. So you see how we've got this happening? We're ready. We'll take it over to the counter. Add our fresh juice, just a little bit. You don't need a ton. Again, you don't want to bury the cake in glaze. Then you stir the glaze. You see how loose it got and beautiful? And now you just take this. You can either spoon it or pour it. And you just pour the glaze right over the cake. And it's going to go down into the center of the dish and soak up into the bottom. And you have this lovely, moist, citrusy, scented carrot almond cake. And I don't know about you, but I've got dessert tonight.